There was a moment when Azeroth didn't feel like a world anymore. It still looked massive, still had systems, still had content, but something had shifted. Players weren't getting lost anymore. They were completing tasks, checking boxes, optimizing routes, logging in with purpose, and logging out just as quickly. So, the question isn't just what changed. It's this: when did World of Warcraft stop feeling like a world and started feeling like a system? After Legion, Blizzard faced a new challenge. Not just how to expand the game, but how to keep players engaged long term. Battle for Azeroth didn't try to reinvent WoW. Instead, it tried to extend it. At its core, BFA introduced Azerite systems, a replacement for artifact weapons, but instead of a single evolving item, it became a network of traits, armor pieces, layered progression systems. On paper, this looked like depth, more customization, more control, but in practice, it felt different. Less like building a character, more like maintaining a system. Players weren't asking, what do I want to play? They were asking, what is optimal right now? And once optimization becomes the goal, what happens to exploration? BFA didn't break WoW, but it revealed something important. The game was no longer driven by discovery, it was driven by retention design. Shadowlands didn't just continue this direction, it amplified it. Instead of one progression system, there were many. Covenants, soulbinds, conduits, legendary crafting, Torghast runs tied to power progression. Each system added structure, but together they created friction. For the first time in WoW's history, players felt like they were making wrong choices. Choosing a covenant wasn't just aesthetic, it affected performance, endgame viability, even social perception. And this changed behavior in a subtle but powerful way. Players didn't just play less freely, they played more cautiously. When choices become pressure, is it still choice? Shadowlands marked a turning point, not because it failed mechanically, but because it exposed the cost of over-systemization. But systems weren't the only thing changing. The relationship between players and Blizzard was shifting too. For years, WoW operated on trust. Players believed the game would improve, the systems would evolve, the world would remain worth returning to. During Shadowlands, that trust weakened. Content delays, system friction, and a growing sense that feedback wasn't being heard quickly enough. This wasn't a sudden collapse. It was slower than that. A gradual disconnect. Guilds became quieter. Friends logged in less often. Not because the game disappeared, but because the reason to log in changed. And when the community weakens, can an MMO still feel alive? Shadowlands didn't just challenge WoW systems, it challenged its identity as a shared experience. Dragonflight didn't try to outdesign the problem, it stepped away from it. Instead of adding more systems, it removed pressure. Covenants were gone. Borrowed power systems were reduced. Progression became more flexible. But the biggest shift wasn't mechanical, it was philosophical. Dragonflight asked a different question. What if players just played? Dragon riding captured this perfectly. Movement wasn't a task anymore. It was a skill, a feeling, something you learned, not optimized. And suddenly, the world felt larger again. Not because it changed, but because the player's relationship to it changed. Dragonflight didn't fix everything, but it restored something essential: freedom. With the war within, Blizzard made its direction clearer. WoW wasn't just continuing, it was restructuring. The introduction of warbands changed progression fundamentally. Characters were no longer isolated, they became part of a shared ecosystem. Gear, reputation, progression started to feel account-wide. This wasn't just a feature, it was a response. to years of friction, to repetition, to the cost of starting over. At the same time, the world itself became more focused, less scattered, more intentional. And looking forward to midnight, the direction becomes even clearer. Not expansion for the sake of scale, but expansion for the sake of cohesion. After years of adding more, is WoW finally learning to do less. The modern era isn't about returning to the past, it's about understanding it and choosing what to carry forward. World of Warcraft didn't disappear, it changed, over and over again. From a world you explored, to a system you optimized, and now something in between. Back then, players logged in without a plan. They got lost, they discovered things, they stayed longer than they intended. Today, the world is still there, but the way we move through it is different. And maybe that's the real history of WoW. Not just how the game changed, but how we did. New case files release every Monday, Wednesday and Friday.